While some of the games may not count, we have basketball to actually talk about and discuss this week. Welcome all into the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm joined by Thomas Dunn. I'm Zach Farmer, and there's a lot to get into. We are going to do our predictions this week, our 1 through 12s, our awards. We're going to go over all of that. WCC Media Day is also this week. We will be coming to you live from Las Vegas and Resorts World, starting at 12:30 on both YouTube and Twitch. So be sure to follow us along there, and also send us any questions that you have that you want to know from coaches, players, and we will try our best to get all of that through. Exciting week, as there's a number of things to get to, but we have to start on a somber note and a sad note, as USF's Director of Athletics, Larry Williams, passed away at the age of 62 just this week. And obviously, this is a huge blow for the USF community and everyone involved around the program, but also throughout the WCC. He was a graduate of UC San Diego. He was the athletic director at Portland, and then, of course, then returned to USF to be the AD there. So a lot of strong West Coast ties. I never got the pleasure to meet Larry officially, but just taking the quote from Stu Jackson over the weekend, quote, Larry was a nationally respected colleague whose leadership benefited collegiate athletics and countless student athletes. Larry was beloved by everyone, and we are grateful for his commitment and legacy to the conference. His life and lasting professional impact will be remembered with admiration. I don't know if you actually got to interact with him. Obviously, like, you were working with the conference, so you got maybe a little bit more hands-on with a lot of the teams as well. Just like, kind of any thoughts on the passing of Larry Williams?
Yeah, I got to meet him twice. Once at the yearly WCC, kind of like think of it like the winter meetings, so to speak, in different sports. But the WCC had their yearly meetings. Met Larry informally, and then more formally I think this was about 2 months ago now. Met him and the now interim AD Stephanie Shreve-Hawkins there was an event in San Mateo with Ron Rivera, Andrew Luck, and Mina Kimes, and they were both present for that. So I got to meet and chat with him a little bit informally there, and it was cool to meet him, cool to interact with him. A very good head on his shoulders, and that was kind of the vibe I got from some of the USF community and their response, that he really cared about USF athletics. And even if there was some disagreement in terms of things like Chase Center, for example, we know how much of a hot topic that was. I think the fact that he put it out there, and the fact that he's willing to go do something different, and willing to do something to make a difference in the athletic department, both in terms of like revenue, dollars, viewership, but then also in terms of caring for the people, the student athletes. I thought that was very apparent. And it's a sad note to start the episode on, that's for sure, because you never want to see something like this happen, especially in this industry where lots of people have been doing this a long time, and even it stretches out to different communities. I saw Marquette, their response in the community and his role in bringing back the Big East back together. So it's not just a West Coast thing. It's not just a Bay Area thing. It's not even just a college basketball thing. It's affected a lot of people.
Yeah. And our hearts are with his family, obviously everyone he touched at USF and across the college landscape, because this is a loss, obviously a huge loss for USF. You think about what the program as a whole, not just basketball, but athletics in general, has been able to kind of do over the last few years under his stewardship. You saw the direction, as like, this was a program that really looked like it's going somewhere, and had like kind of like it felt like a stronger direction than maybe what we've seen in the past. But we'll obviously, like, it's going to be a big transition for USF. We'll see what happens from here. But for now, it's just thoughts and prayers with Larry's family and everyone surrounding the program. But now we move on to a more basketball directly related topic, and that is not good news, and that is that the NCAA denied Tyon Grant-Foster's eligibility waiver. This was something that we've known could come up in the last few weeks. I mean, this has been a bit of a roller coaster, up and down all summer long. He initially put in the waiver in June, was denied, put in another waiver, denied. This was kind of like the third time. denied again, just a couple weeks away from the season. Also was even given like a temporary waiver to participate in practice just a couple weeks ago, and then we get this. It's just like we'll hear a quote from Mark Few in a little bit, but I mean, we keep this yo-yoing. He's going to be back in court on Thursday to file an injunction on this decision. But again, it just continues to feel like the NCAA is dropping the ball on this specific case because this one is so unique, and it just I know everyone points out like how old he's going to be by the time the season is over, but when you look at the timeline, you look at how much basketball he's actually played, he should still be able to be on the court somewhere.
Yeah, we'll just say it's a crazy, I think is the biggest understatement. It might be the understatement of the well, it's not summer anymore, but crazy understatement of the times right now. And we're heading for a preliminary injunction hearing Thursday while we're at WCC Media Day, so that's fun. We may be getting breaking news in our laps, depending on how that goes, but usually take some time to roll on those things. I unfortunately have some apt experience with things I'm covering in preliminary injunctions. For those of you who are as sicko as I am, I'm an avid NASCAR fan, and there are teams currently suing NASCAR. And there have been about 6 different preliminary injunction hearings. So unfortunately, very used to it. So it's not a good thing really for anybody. It's almost getting to the point of airing your dirty laundry, so to speak. And no matter what the decision that comes out of this is, there's still going to be a party that's not happy, and still a party that's probably going to do something to get that specific decision reversed. So kind of see how it is. But in terms of what you were just mentioning with the overall flow, I mean, it goes without saying, it's just another day in the NCAA.
All right. Well, let's hear from Mark Few as he was asked about this after their exhibition on Sunday.
It's just been a really, really tough deal. He's an incredible guy. He's got an incredible story. I've been now coaching college for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of these situations, and a lot of these waivers have went through. I know it's a hard situation for the NCAA, with all these waivers that happen to be out there. But listen, I've never seen one as unique as this. He literally died. His heart stopped not once but twice. When he was on the floor, and he didn't have 2 years of basketball. He's put everything into basketball. It means the world to him. And again, I've seen all kinds of things for, my cousin wasn't feeling well, so I got to go home, so I need a waiver, and that was granted. And I didn't start last year. I didn't get to play point. I'm mentally off, so I need a waiver, and that was granted. And he literally died. He died twice. Okay. And again, I've been a huge advocate for the NCAA, and will continue to be. They got a tough gig, but they're just wrong on this one. So hopefully Ty's filed a case, and we'll hope that it turns out the right way. But it's just been tough. The timing of it's too. We submitted a waiver way back in June, and so he really doesn't have any options here if this doesn't come through.
So one of the things, obviously, like mentioned, the timeline of what this is going to look like and everything else. Going through it, if you follow Theo Lawson from the Spokesman Review, he's done a really good job kind of laying out what the situation has been for this process. Gonzaga initially submitted the waiver on June 6th and was denied on June 24th. They submitted for a request for reconsideration on July 17th. That was then denied on September 12th. So almost 2 months later, that secondary denial was put back by the NCAA, and then they submitted appeal. Gonzaga submitted appeal on September 25th, and that was what was denied on Friday. So now we are at the stage of Thursday's preliminary injunction. So for Tyon Grant-Foster, this is a big deal. For Gonzaga, this is a big deal because this is kind of like do you actually, like, we were kind of texting back and forth about what this actually meant as far as their outlook for the season, because with him, this is a team that could probably make a really deep run to the tournament, assuming he's healthy and ready to go. But if they don't have him, it does feel like that and we talked about this with Andy Patton last week, that there's probably a bit of a ceiling on this team if they don't have him on this roster.
Yeah, it takes the wind out of the sails, really. I mean, you look at everything else in the way that they kind of not built the team around him, but the way he would fit into this puzzle and find a way to kind of be at least from my perspective, I've always been harping on where's that commonly known Zag guard firepower. And I think that would have been exactly it. Getting downhill, finding a way to get to the line. We've seen his explosiveness on full display at Grand Canyon. Trying to continue to be consistent with the outside shot, sometimes with some dips involved. But you take a long form view at it. I mean, he's exactly the type of guy you want, exactly the type of guy that they need, and someone who I think would have absolutely added to their profile in March. And now that they presumably may not have him, and obviously we're not gonna 100% close the book on it, but as it stands, if they don't have him for this season, I think it really severely limits the ceiling for what Gonzaga can do this year. I think they obviously are still going to be top 2 in the WCC. I think that goes without question. But I think that when you look at what actually the Gonzaga expectations are, they may not be able to reach them this year, and that really through no fault of anybody else.
Yeah, and I mean it really kind of like thinks about, because I was even thinking about our predictions or what that was going to look like, and I mean, honestly, like thinking this through, does this even make me rethink who I was going to pick to win the conference? Because I mean, a little bit after seeing the ways St. Mary's played on Saturday, not to say that there weren't some warts in what they have to do and some things that they have to fix. But when we get to January, when we get to February, when we get to the WCC tournament, I mean, I don't think it's a crazy thing to think that, the team that has won the last 2 regular season championships and a share of the one 3 years ago could be back in that mix and be right back in the middle of everything. Now, obviously there's going to be some level of, think about what Gonzaga brings back, the known commodities that the Zags have, and it will be a very different thing for St. Mary's, but it's starting to make me think a little bit more about what those predictions are going to be. And of course that leads us into thinking about what that all is, because now we have to talk about our picks. We each have gone through all of the teams. We've gone through each of the awards. I've even probably made some last minute edits of my own to my picks as we've been kind of going through. Nothing too crazy, nothing that's going to I don't think change anything on the whole the totality of what we're doing. But all right, Thomas, let's start with you. Let's start with your picks, and we will start at the top of the WCC. So who do you have going through the conference list this season?
So I think in the last dance, I think the Zags do get it done. And I think, honestly, it's more of a crunch at the top in recent memory. And I still will maintain that consistency. I've been on that soapbox for months now, saying there are more questions about Gonzaga and St. Mary's than we've ever had with them, from my perspective at least. And while I do still have moderate concerns about what they can do offensively, I think when you have what I believe to be the best player in the conference, I believe you have a running mate who's going to be growing alongside him, and someone who with bigger opportunity will get better in Braden Huff. I think that Gonzaga is well positioned to take the crown in their last year. I think they're well positioned to execute and try and find a way to maybe even split with St. Mary's. I think that's like I can totally see that being on the table, obviously, in terms of that matchups. I think this year, especially with these two, it's going to be more about who doesn't lose to anybody else compared to them beating each other. I think there's a lot more compactness with this conference. And I look at Gonzaga and I look at the way that I think Mark Few knows he was going to want to go out on top here, and the way that they've kind of got some guys in reserve like Steele Venters who could really find a way to elevate himself and get himself back into the conversation of a guy like he was at Eastern Washington. I like the Zags. I think the good qualification is I'm not 100% sure on that. Like I think that's the best way to say it. There's no at least for me, Zach, and you can disagree all you want. Like, I don't think there's a clear favorite this year. I think it's a little bit more muddy in the water in terms of that, but I think I'm going to go default with at times all reliable.
And this is going to be the first spot where we divide and split, because I am going to go against probably what I've done the last few years. And because I have been the one picking Gonzaga the last 2 years and have been wrong every time. So you know what? I need to stick with my alma mater, because you know what? This St. Mary's team, if Gonzaga doesn't have Tyon Grant-Foster, this team does end up being very different. Now, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the injunction on Thursday. We will see what happens there. But if I look at now because I had obviously some big questions about what St. Mary's is going to be. But after the exhibition on Saturday against Arizona, even though St. Mary's lost that one 81-68, there were some positive things. Joshua Dent, I think became very clearly, looked like someone who was ready to fill the point guard role. He had a team high 14 points. He did have some unfortunate turnovers, some silly turnovers, unforced ones. He's going to have to clean that up, but there's time to do that. If you look at what they were going to do at the 3, Dylan Shaw looks really good in that offense. I think we're going to see a lot from him in this version of this St. Mary's squad. And then Tony Duckett, I thought, looked really good as well. And I don't think there's going to be huge expectations for him, but that's someone who is going to get you buckets. And that's something that St. Mary's has needed. They needed someone who can create their own shot, be able to find different ways to score, because when you look at that roster, that was something they needed a little bit more of from this past season. And also they're going to shoot threes better than they did a year ago. I know that was not going to be hard to do based on how bad they were a year ago, but they're going to be a better 3-point shooting team. And I think that that's something that they've needed. And defense is going to be a challenge, but they have time. And I think that's the one thing that St. Mary's is going to benefit from, is the fact that they can work out November and December. And by the time we get to conference play around the new year, I think they'll be a little bit more, they'll be ready. And then of course they don't have to see Gonzaga until the end of January. So they'll have plenty of time to get ready for the Zags and what those matchups are going to be, because we know that's really kind of like the flip of what this conference is going to be, is what these two do against each other. And I'm sure that these last two matchups are going to be classics. I'm sure that these two are going to leave everything out there in the last two regular season matchups, one in Kennel, one in Moraga. But I think I'm taking St. Mary's to win the league this year. Gonzaga obviously is right there second, USF following at third. And I think it's this next window where we're going to start to see the separation of our picks here in the middle of the pack.
I mean, look at the overlay down below. And I know there could be some fan bases that are already in my mentions that are seeing it as it rolls along the screen here. There are some changes that we got.
And I mean, as you're looking at it down below, like if you're just listening to it, all right, Thomas, it's like you have Santa Clara at the 4 spot, Oregon State at the 5, Seattle U, the newbie, is at 6, Washington State 7, San Diego 8, Pacific 9, LMU 10. It feels like that's like the lump that everyone else is kind of involved in. That 4 through 10, there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching, and you have your Broncos at 4. And how much did the Darlin edition change where you had them? Because was it still Oregon State above them at that moment? And how are you looking at this middle of the pack?
I'll tell you this much: it didn't hurt. That's for sure. When I look at how I didn't have a good read on Santa Clara, and I still don't, to be honest. I think the best way I can say it is how we said it in the preview show: is they're going to be the box of chocolates team in the WCC this year. We're going to get what we're going to get, and we're just going to. And if you're a Santa Clara fan and you're an alum like myself, you're just hoping that it's really good, because this is probably one of the first years under Herb Sendek in some time where the roster is largely pretty unproven. And in spurts, you had proven guys even when you had your Adama Alpha Balls, when you had your Brandon Pajimskis. Obviously, Jalen Williams breaking out was a homegrown type of thing. But this year, I think there's a lot more of okay, who's gonna kind of strike with a new opportunity? And I think that's the one thing we're gonna see, because it might not just be Thierry Darlin. It could just be, is Garrett Normand gonna do something different? Is Chris Tadjo gonna do something different? I think there are numerous guys who can step up for Santa Clara, which is the thing. Now, for me, it's always about the proof. Like, what are you gonna do? What if another guy steps up alongside Darlin, because I do expect Darlin to matriculate well into this conference, then I feel a lot better about Santa Clara at 4. If it gets to be a little bit more muddy, I think it's going to be, the Oregon States, the Seattles, the Washington States, can they drag Santa Clara back into the middle of the pack bar fight? And I think that's really, for me, I'm hedging my bets that they can get towards another 20-win season, and I think they'll be close to it. I'm not sure if they exactly get there, but I think when I look at at least the way that Herb Sendek and co have proved over the last few years that they can do 4, and until someone actually does it, much like with the top 3 in this conference, I'll keep them there, even if I'm a little more hesitant in years past.
And, going through this group, it was hard, like thinking about where all these teams were going to fit, because there's a lot of unproven components to a lot of these teams. And one of the things I was starting to look at, I agreed with you. I have Santa Clara at the 4. But Seattle was the one that was my biggest, the more and more I thought about it, the more I started to see the numbers, the more I thought about this squad. Like, I have them 5th. I went all the way. I'm going to be really bullish on Seattle U in year 1, that they will jump all the way up to 5th. When you look at the pieces they were able to add, who they do bring back, between Maldonado and Arrington being on the perimeter, you bring in a Brock Felder, you bring in, you look at some of the pieces that they had coming back, and I think they have a really good mix that is going to do well in conference play. Now, of course, we've talked about their schedule not being great in the non-conference, that they are going to have to kind of really figure things out before they get the WCC play, and maybe it's a little bit of a rough go at the beginning, but I do think that Seattle's going to have enough time to kind of clean those things up and make a run in WCC play. Because again, I think 4 through 10, there's going to be a lot of room for growth, a lot of room to really think about where all these teams are going to be. I mean, looking at mine, I had Oregon State 6, San Diego, I have at 7, because they brought in a lot of talent. Steve Lavin was kind of like that team. They had that group that was able to make a run a couple years ago. And we can see when he's able to get talent, they just get better and better and better as the season goes on. And we didn't get to see that. Well, we even got to see a little bit of that last year. He just did not have the talent to go with the rest of that squad a year ago. LMU at 8, Washington State at 9. I know, throwing them all the way down into the 9 hole for the Cougs. I mean, there's so many unknowns about that team, and I do think that we have seen at least some level of consistency from Oregon State in the last year. We've seen even LMU, even though they had some very wild ups and downs last year, and even in their exhibition the other night against USC, awful first half. But once they finally woke up, they looked a lot like a pretty strong team. Again, this is one of the better defensive teams in the WCC. They held Santa Clara into the 50s. They held St. Mary's in the 50s. This is a team that knows how to drag teams into the mud and make them play almost a rock fight every night. Pacific, I had it down to 10, then Pepperdine, Portland rounding out that group. But I mean, there's going to be so much in that middle of the pack that's going to be up and down all year long.
Yeah, and it's going to be who can sneak a game maybe up at the top. And I look at those Seattle U Redhawks, and especially if they're playing at the Redhawks Center versus Climate Pledge, I'll have to go back and kind of look at the split of those games. But I think when you look at the team that's going to probably be the biggest pain in the butt to play on a day-to-day basis, I think Seattle's right up there. I think I'm not going to give them the St. Mary's moniker, but I think I will give them that, if you do not bring your A game up to the Pacific Northwest, you will be falling to the wayside and getting dispatched pretty quickly. I look at that Washington State pick at 9. I'm like, I share some of those concerns in the sense that David Riley and co may have over course corrected with their roster, and now I'm not necessarily 100% sure if it fits the style that he wants to play. So that's a question I do kind of want to see answered over the course of the season. And I think I'm pretty almost equally as bullish on USD as you are. I think they'll be a lot better this year. I think how much better is the essential question with them. And LMU, I'm happy to be proven wrong. I just right now I need to see a little bit more from them. And when you look at the way the highs and lows are of these past few years, I've seen a little bit more lows that have discouraged me more than the highs that have encouraged me. So that's kind of where I land on LMU, and I know that's where we differ, but we'll see if they can prove me wrong.
All right, now we have to go into the picks for the awards, because this is also another area where it's always a little bit of a challenge, because I mean, you never know what each group is going to look like. And also I feel like some of the ones that are hard, like six man is always hard, because if they're any good, they're probably not going to be a six man for very long. And for the freshmen, this year just felt so much harder than in years past, because you had a lot of guys who like, I just don't know how many teams are going to have minutes for freshmen to play all that much. And those who do, is it actually all that much? Like, how good are those freshmen going to be? I mean, I think about like the likes of Pepperdine or Portland, who are going to have the minutes available, but I don't know if I've seen the talent on those teams that, like, this is the freshman who's going to get a ton and make an impact. Not unlike an Austin Rapp last year, who played for that Portland squad, but was very clear that he was going to be one of the best freshmen, and turned out the best freshman in the WCC a year ago.
Absolutely. And I think especially like the higher you get on our perceived totem pole within the conference, like breaking in as a freshman and trying to earn minutes, like imagine trying to be a freshman and getting Mark Few's rotation, a freshman getting in Randy Bennett's rotation, like a freshman getting in Chris Gurlison's rotation. Like, it is hard. It absolutely hard. And I think it makes it all the more harder, especially when we were trying to predict our awards and figuring out like who actually earns their keep. And I think I settled on someone who, based on what we've heard from both media members and coaches alike, that he can absolutely make some hay and try and be freshman of the year. But I think it goes without saying, we might as well just lead off with our award picks. I think going back to my rankings, I think the Zags got the best player in the conference, and that's why I'm going to pick him to win Player of the Year in the last dance. Graham Ike. I think, to me, not that he's untouched in a class of his own, but I think he's far and away the guy who can almost put the team on his back, and I think it's going to earn the Zags a conference championship this year. I think he's really dang good if he can just limit his fouls and find a way to try and be better on defense. I think he finds a way to win going away, but I think you look pound for pound some of the best in this conference. I think the buck starts almost ends with Graham Ike. So he's my Player of the Year. For those of you who are listening on audio.
All right, we had lost Thomas there for a little bit, talking about Graham Ike. It's like clearly someone was hacking in and just making sure that we don't give the Zags too much credit when we're talking about what they're capable of doing. But I mean, all right, so you have Gonzaga being like Graham Ike being that dude. Like, kind of go over the rest of the picks, because I'm looking at DPOY and I'm like, Paulus Morauskas?
Yeah, I think honestly, to me, it feels like he's going to be the glue of the St. Mary's defense this year, which is a different role compared to last year. But I feel compared to whereas the anchor was Mitchell Saxon and Kyle Bowen, and even to a way of like Alex Dukas, I feel like Paulus Morauskas is going to be someone where he's not going to be as absent as he was, especially I know this is a defensive player of the year nominee, but I look last year at his offensive time at times, like he sometimes was just absent. I think this year he's going to be a lot less absent. I think he's going to be a really good connector, and whether that results in more notoriety in terms of his stats, I think it's going to be more in terms of if you watch the game, you can tell that Paulus Morauskas, especially on the boards, we know how Randy Bennett emphasizes the boards. I think that's going to be a big deal for him and kind of how he makes his moniker felt. And I think he's going to be really good, someone who can feed into Harry Wessels, and I think it's going to be really noticeable in terms of help side defense. I think when I look at the way I nominated for this, it's more about connecting and putting the system in place. And you mentioned it with the scrimmage earlier. There are going to be guys that are learning on the fly. Josh Dent, Dylan Shaw, Tony Duckett. I think Paulus Morauskas is going to shine through that and trying to help be the guy that sets the standard on defense, because it's people, instead of watching him look at the leaders of last year, he is the leader this year. So people are going to look towards him to set that example. I think he will set that example, and I think that'll result with him in a defensive player of the year. Coach of the year, I think when we always take a step back and look at the perceived like reality of where a team is entering the year, there's always St. Mary's is always not criminally underrated, but they always get a worse shake from a year-to-year basis compared to other teams. And I think that's where Randy Bennett shines. I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think when you look at him, you look at the way he's gotten more with less over the course of the years. This is the type of wheelhouse he is. We looked at some of the preseason rankings earlier. I believe it was I believe it was Ken Palm, where the Zags and the Gales have like a 47 team difference. And I think that was a bridge too far for me. There's not 47 teams in between Gonzaga and St. Mary's this year. They're just not. And when I look at St. Mary's and everyone, and even though our own questions that we've raised, Randy Bennett has earned the benefit of the doubt and trying to overcome the odds. And especially this year, where I may not pick them to win the conference, but when I look at the totem pole of where they're perceived to be and maybe where they may get to, if he ultimately does it again and wins another conference championship as the Zags exit, I think that's going to be a Coach of the Year nominee. I think when you looked at where people are picking them to be versus where they end up being, I think that's the biggest difference to where Randy Bennett wins Coach of the Year. Sixth Man of the Year, I struggled a lot with this, and you mentioned already just because of the timing. I'm going to go for Kostamasic of USF. There are some other guys, depending on how the starting lineup fell out from other schools, who I would have picked. And just for the record, just so it's out there, I would have picked Mookie Cook, but I think he's going to start for USF at 3. And this didn't really hinge on Tyon Grant-Foster, but now I think it kind of makes it more obvious. If Tyon was in the lineup, I think it would have relegated Steele Venters to the bench. So I was going to put in Steele Venters, but I think Venters is going to start now. So all things considered, I think Kostamasic is the firepower off the bench. And I think he's going to really be a big pain for opposing benches to clear off. Terry Darlin, newcomer. I think I'm a little giddy about it. I'm just like, okay, if you're in the NBA G League and you're coming to the WCC, you're going to find a way to get it done. And that was really, it wasn't complex analysis with that one. I think it was more of just like, okay, who's the shiny new toy? And I think Terry Darlin really fits that fold. And then you get to the last dance of Freshman of the Year, which I think is going to be very difficult. And I went Mario Saint-Superi of Gonzaga. And yes, like Mark Few you better earn minutes if you're a freshman trying to get into Mark Few's rotation. But from what Andy Patton has said, from what we've seen in press conferences, from what Coach Few has mentioned across different interviews, he is absolutely impressed with the way that Saint-Superi has kind of made himself available across different roles over the course of this time, and knowing that it's going to be a different type of play style coming over here to the West Coast Conference compared to what he's been used to doing in Eurobasket and such. So I think it's going to be a little bit of I'd say up and down road to start. But when I look at someone who has ample opportunity to do it, and you can already see the praise going away, I don't think he's going to get the chair pulled from under him and then eventually benched and out of the rotation. I think Mario Saint-Superi will find a way to be Freshman of the Year. Zach, take it away.
All right. So we agree on 2, and then it is completely different for everybody else. So we'll go with the quick that are the same. Yes, I agree. Graham Ike has probably been the most efficient player in the WCC over the last 2 seasons. And the fact that you can make the case that probably 2 years ago was his best case that he could have been player of the year. And we know that he has come up short in these couple of years, but I don't see the guy who is going to take that spot this time around. So I got to pick Graham Ike to be that player of the year. The other one we align with is Coach of the Year, and that is Randy Bennett. So again, like if I'm picking St. Mary's to win the league, I've got to put Randy as being Coach of the Year.
I know.
That's
a difference for me.
I mean, I keep thinking about like the other thing. I was like, I want to like kind of credit and get like put either Chris Gerlofson in there or again, like Mark Few on the way out. Like there's so many different angles to go with, or even looking at a team that maybe isn't expected to do as much and then is going to do a lot of it. I mean, I could have picked Chris Victor from Seattle, considering where I have them in the standings, or I could have gone with Steve Lavin, considering where I have them in the standings and what the expectations were from a year ago. But I got to go with Randy Bennett on this one because, like, if I think they're going to win the league and I don't have them with the Player of the Year, I gotta put him as being that spot. Now, here's where we separate. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going with Tyrone Riley. I'm thinking about the length. I'm thinking about the impact that he's going to have for USF if USF is going to reach the heights that we think they are capable of. And you think about all the different things that he's going to be asked to do this year. He doesn't have to do a ton of scoring, but he's going to have to be one of the more versatile guys in the WCC. And right now, there aren't a ton of quote unquote standout defenders. Even looking at the St. Mary's squad, which is so used to being full of those elite defenders, I don't know if I see them right away. Mitchell Saxon held the award down for 2 years, and a lot of times the conversation last year was there wasn't even a close second to Mitchell Saxon. So now that we have to actually think about who is the next guy going into year 2, I think Tyrone Riley is going to be right in the mix for DPOY. Sixth man, going back I'm going back to St. Mary's and Tony Duckett, because I do think that the backcourt is kind of set to an extent. Mikey Lewis is going to be in there. I think what we saw the other night, Josh Dent is going to probably solidify the point guard, because Randy does like to have a true point guard in that starting lineup, so that you have those 1-2. That means Tony Duckett's coming off the bench, and that's a guy who can give you buckets. And the fact that St. Mary's won Sixth Man of the Year last year when it was Mikey Lewis, I think kind of adds to that idea that, yeah, it very well could be a St. Mary's guy who takes that role again, especially with someone who's going to provide the shooting and it's going to give you the numbers. I think that will allow him to kind of like creep into that role, especially when there really isn't a true starting spot available at the moment, unless the wheels completely fall off of Josh Dent. That's the only way I see him breaking into that starting lineup. Newcomer, I mean, Terry Darlin is an easy one to do, but also maybe the other easy one was Braden Smith. Like, you go back to Gonzaga, you think about what he's going to have to be for the Zags. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. He was practicing against Ryan Nembhard last year. He knows the system. It's not like this is someone coming straight off the street. He got to spend a year at the Zags facility. He got to spend a year in Spokane to get ready for this moment. And I do think that Braden Smith is going to be able to hit the ground running. And so, like, newcomer of the year, Braden Smith makes a lot of sense to me. And then freshman of the year, I'm going back to kind of what I saw, because I was a little curious, to St. Mary's and Dylan Shaw being my freshman of the year, because I talk about opportunity for freshmen. The way he played the other night, the energy he brings, the talent that's clearly there, he's going to get more and more minutes. I think his role is going to continue to grow as the season goes on. And if you're doing that on a team that is playing for something, that's going to carry a lot of weight. Especially if this is someone who could end up being in the starting lineup from day one. And I think that's the other thing of, like, I get the idea of Mario Saint-Supri, but he's not going to get a ton of minutes. And I think that's where Shaw is going to have an advantage, is that he will likely get more minutes and he'll have a greater opportunity to show what he's capable of doing in his first year. So, I mean, all these awards, I think, can have wild ups and downs. Like, I get the feeling I'm going to be wrong on at least half of these. By the time we get to the end of the year, someone's going to emerge for DPOY. Someone's going to emerge that we didn't know was going to pop out. There's going to be a freshman we didn't think of that's going to end up doing something. And I love doing this exercise because it kind of makes you think and dig for what you're looking at on these teams. But at the same time, it's, as we will get blitzed and ripped to shreds on social for making these picks, because we likely missed somebody on one of the other teams that is going to come out and do some real damage. I think this is that time of year where we're looking on paper. We're starting to see, at least, like, I started to make adjustments after the exhibitions over the weekend of, like, okay, maybe this solidifies that pick a little bit. Oh, I don't like this one nearly as much as I did before. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, I love doing it, but I'm going to hate it when I see the response of the people for the names I missed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm going to air you out before anybody else does. Like, this is version 2 of Zach's picks, everybody, okay? Let it be known that even if you rip me apart, this was my one and only version of my picks. And when I look at my own and I see, okay, where can I be wrong? I think Defensive Player of the Year, I can definitely be upset there. Freshman of the Year, I think will be, it's just hard to pinpoint. And I like your argument about the minutes distribution on there in regards to Shaw versus St. Perry. I think the other thing, it's just hard. It's just really hard to gauge Sixth Man of the Year. It really is, because lineups are so fluid and they change so much. And I look at everything else going on. I like Vukas and Mazic's firepower, but I do see what you're saying about what Tony Duckett brings to the table. So those are the ones that I think that I may struggle with. But I look at Graham Ike. I'm like, it's the final crusade, where he should already have at least one Player of the Year award in his name, but I think he'll actually get it this year.
I mean, Masic was the one you had on your list where, like, even I had him initially, and I was like, because, yeah, that seems like an obvious one, like no doubter to me. And I know, like, even like talked about, it's like, oh yeah, it's like that sixth man of the year. If they're actually that good, a lot of times they end up in the starting lineup at some point, but that's not like that's been a hurdle to win sixth man of the year. We saw Tommy Kuzi win it a few years ago when he basically started half the games for St. Mary's. So it's not like it's been a solely six man only award. We have seen it move back and forth on that. And I mean, thinking about these picks, thinking about where we are, I'm excited to kind of see where these all start to go, what we start to see, and honestly, what we miss, because I'm sure that in a couple of days, we're going to hear it from the coaches of who we missed.
100%,
And the names of like, oh, you need to watch out for this guy, or you didn't talk about him, or watch out for this squad. And like, we're going to get some of that in a few days. We're going to get that from coaches. We're going to get that from players, and we'll be able to hear it straight from them on Thursday from Las Vegas at Resorts World, when we will be coming to you live from WCC Media Day. It does kick off at noon. We will be starting at 12:30, and we will go as long as we can on that day. We'll have players, we'll have coaches, we'll have probably some special guests coming over. Some of the familiar faces that have been on here will be at Media Day as well, so we'll see if we can grab some of them as well. And as we've made our picks, basketball is around the corner. I'm glad we're finally able to stop talking about the what ifs. We can now start talking about the what is, and what we have seen with these teams. Exhibitions aside, you take them with a grain of salt, but there's always some positives, always some things to work on in those games. I know there were some overreactions to LMU, to St. Mary's, to Seattle, to Gonzaga over the weekend, and the bad, I think, is the one you can't overreact to. You can't overreact to the bad, because you don't know about what the rotations were planned. Maybe they were trying to get certain guys more minutes. Maybe they're looking at certain plays, because they're never going to run the A stuff in these games, because they don't want any other coaches to actually have game film on the stuff they're really going to run with their top guys. So looking at this, I'm excited to finally get down to Vegas and really kind of dig in to basketball season, as we are now just a couple weeks away from the first official tip-off.
It's gonna be like a family reunion Thursday. We're about to see everybody in Vegas. Super excited to get there. Super excited to do the live show, beat a ton more of the players and coaches, reconnect with some of the fellows that we already know. And yeah, you're right. I am damn excited about getting to an actual college basketball season, fast approaching. I believe. Well, let me make sure I do my math correct here. Less than 2 weeks away here. So we are finding a way here to get to this finish line. And like you mentioned, it's not what if, it's what is. Super, super ecstatic to finally get back to it and embark on another journey, because there are going to be some newcomers that really step up to the plate, and we're going to be like, wow, like either X coach did this or Y roster has come together to do that. I'm really excited to see who kind of makes a name for themselves. Some of them maybe we didn't give enough credence to, enough credit for. And like you said, we're going to hear it a little bit Thursday, but to actually see it happen in these games, I think is the one thing I really want to see develop. And I'm excited to see for what happens in that department, and kind of what happens in year one with the Seattle U Redhawks. That's a little thing. I'm just like, what is the actual matriculation level like to the West Coast Conference?
We're going to learn a lot more about every one of these teams in a couple of days. Thanks all for listening. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod, at Thomas Dunn 24, at Post by Zack. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will catch you live from Las Vegas on Thursday at 12:30. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.